Hello, good morning. Welcome back to, I'm going to start calling this Conversations with the Cricket Lady, I think, because realistically that's what it is. So, welcome back to the Cricket Lady's YouTube channel, back for another, it appears to be a weekly live Q&A. This will change as the months progress. January tends to be a quieter month, although this year it has not been. The first half of January, I don't know where you guys are in the world, but here in central Iowa, yesterday we got over 12 inches of snow. So that pretty much sucked. It went from like 50 degrees on Thursday to snowing Friday, continuing to snow Friday overnight. So when I went to bed on Friday night, I was like, oh, I'll have no problem, getting down to the cricket barn and doing chores in the morning. Like, I'll just take the truck, I'll leave my car parked. Woke up the next morning to 12 and a half inches of snow-ish with basically the entire yard drifted shut. So it was not necessarily what I expected when I woke up. And then, it was just even shoveling out in front of the doors, shoveling off the porch so that I could get to firewood to get the fire, kicked back on. It was a lot of shoveling, and some of that snow was really heavy and really wet. But, so yeah, if wherever you are in the world, if you want to take some of our snow for us, you are more than welcome, because 12 and a half or 12.6 inches or whatever it was that they said at the Ames airport was plenty for one go around. But it is the middle of January in Iowa, and this is only our second measurable snowfall this winter. So can't complain too much, but I definitely do have to get down to Collins today and shovel all of my sidewalks. So that was the other reason I had to get dug out yesterday, so I could go there today and clean everything off. So that has been this week. Some other exciting things happened this week, but I can't talk about them quite yet. Actually, I don't know when I'm going to be able to talk about them. Timeline, nothing like being a tease. But some really cool things, really cool opportunity that came up. We will see how it shakes out. There's a ways to go in the process, but it looks like all in all, it's a cool experience regardless of whatever comes out of it. But let's get to the Q&A. Oh, and I will say, for now, like I said, I'm going to try and make these Q&As weekly while I have time, generally on Sundays. I think I'll probably stick with the mornings, so I might switch to some evening ones. We'll see. And then as the months progress and I get into more events and things like that, I will do my best to keep them weekly, but realistically, they're probably going to shift to monthly. So we will see what happens. But for now, I have 4 questions that came up either from last week's Q&A that got dropped in last week's Q&A, or got dropped on other videos that I wanted to address, or other sources. So I usually post that I'm going live on my Facebook. I post it usually on my Instagram, but I don't think I did that today. And then sometimes I post it on Reddit as well. So these questions come from all of those. They come from videos. They come from live in this chat. So if you're on this chat and you do have a question that comes up, or you have a question about my answer to another question, please drop it in the chat. Happy to discuss. All right, let's start with question number 1. This one might be mildly controversial, but that's okay. It's come up a few different times, which is why I wanted to address it. Any thoughts on cocoa block versus peat moss? I'm trying to convince my family to go with cocoa in the garden this year because peat moss isn't great for the environment, ? This I have heard from a few different people saying, well, we don't want to use peat moss because it's not sustainable, so we use coconut coir because it is sustainable. Is it though? So you can do your own research on this, and you can think through the process however you would like. To me, your trade-off on sustainability of your coconut coir versus your peat moss, one is not really more sustainable than the other. The argument that coconut coir, because it is food waste, automatically gives it this halo effect of being sustainable. Where are those coconuts coming from? Why are we harvesting so many? What are the impacts of intensively growing, harvesting, processing coconuts? Like, is there that much merit to it? Personally, I don't think that there is. I think that the sustainable halo is a false flag on that one, because I think all of the things that go into it that pop out the end product, while yes, it is a waste product that would theoretically get thrown away, it doesn't make the entire industry sustainable purely because you have an end product that they are now making money on that they were not previously. That doesn't automatically make it sustainable as an industry whole. The other big thing with the peat moss, and that's the thing on the peat moss side too, if you look at it from, you mentioned that you're going to put it in a garden. If you look at it statistically on where peat moss is used as an overall soil amendment, the gardening impact of it is teeny tiny. It might make you feel better, like you are being more sustainable by switching out of that, but I don't know if the reality is that you are actually helping anything. Like I said, do your own research on peat moss versus coconut coir, and sustainability aside, like, you have to do what works for you. If you switch from peat moss to coconut coir, and let's say on the cricket rearing side, you can't get any eggs to hatch out of your coconut coir because it's been adulterated, because there's too high of salt, because there's the many things that can possibly go wrong with coconut coir. If you switch from peat moss to go to coconut coir and you can't get any eggs to hatch, I don't care if it's sustainable, it doesn't work. So you need to do what works for you, and that may be the same on the garden. Like, maybe you switch from peat moss to coconut coir and your tomatoes don't grow. Cool, it was more sustainable, but like, did that solve your problem? Probably not. So I don't think it is cut and dry, black and white, that coconut coir is more sustainable than peat moss. I think you need to dig into that a little bit deeper. Sustainability is always a much bigger picture than this is better than that. Everything has consequences. Everything has knock-on effects. Every industry has its own problems. I'm not saying that we should not try to do a little bit better each time, be a little bit more efficient. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, when people make broad, sweeping comments, generalizations from one thing to another, that always raises my spidey sense of, is it though? Are we looking at the whole picture? Because this is a whole picture thing. I will get off my soapbox on that one. That's all I have to say about the coconut coir versus the peat moss. I did find a really cool article on a gardening website addressing it. Off the top of my head, I cannot remember the name of the author or the name of the site, but there are a few really interesting just thought patterns about it. I just explore more than, this is definitely more sustainable than this. Because is it? Okay, second question. Recently, I came to know about chitin contained in cricket protein. I don't know anything about chitin. Can you please tell me? So chitin, I'm going to sound, I don't have any total resources in front of me, but so this is what I know about chitin, which is not a ton. Chitin is present in the exoskeleton of crickets and other arthropods. So any of your crustaceous shellfish, any of your other insects, I believe arachnids and all of those as well. So chitin is the second most abundant biopolymer in the world behind cellulose. It is in like freaking everything. So it's in, like I said, it's in all arthropods. So it's in all insects. It's in fungi, so mushrooms and things like that. It is also the potential source for the crustaceous shellfish allergy. Like that is the crossover effect for, it's the arthropods. That's the crossover effect for the crustaceous shellfish and the insects, which is why some people exhibit an allergic reaction. Supposedly it is the chitin. I think there's probably many different factors. It hasn't been studied enough to know exactly what the trigger is on the crickets versus, or whatever other insect you're eating versus the crustaceous shellfish. And the reason that I say that is because I usually ask people who are allergic to crustaceous shellfish, are you also allergic to mushrooms? Because if you're allergic to crustaceous shellfish and mushrooms, those both have chitin. So theoretically, you're going to be allergic to the insects as well. It's generally not the case. Like most people are not allergic to mushrooms, even though there's chitin in them. So while they say chitin is the source of the crustaceous shellfish relationship and is causing the allergic reaction, I just don't know that that's necessarily the case. But it's something that just has not been studied enough. The other thing with the crustaceous shellfish allergy, like I have met plenty of people that are allergic to saltwater crustaceous shellfish, so shrimp, lobster, crabs, those kind of thing, but have no problem whatsoever with freshwater shellfish. So crawdads, anything you can catch in a freshwater setting, they can eat those, and that's no problem. Generally speaking, they don't have any problems with the crickets either. My guess on that one is it's somehow related to the iodine and the way that everything interacts that way. But again, like there's so much research that needs to be done on that, that just has not been done yet. So back to chitin. Total aside about the allergies and everything that way. Back to chitin. So chitin is has a lot of potential upside as a value add. Chitin causes some certain issues with bioavailability, as I understand it anyways, as bioavailability of certain nutrients within the insects. So by removing the chitin, you make certain things like iron and some of the protein easier to digest and access for your body. But currently, there's no good, efficient way to extract the chitin from the crickets. That's not to say that it's not something that will be developed in the future. Right now, leaving the chitin in is the only economically effective and efficient way to do it. That being said, if there's a way to purely extract the chitin from the crickets, not only does that make it a more bioavailable, nutrient bioavailable product in some ways, the chitin, if it's pure chitin that can be extracted, that chitin can be sold as an ingredient, or as a like a research chemical, I guess is what you would call it, and it can be quite expensive, like $3,000+ per kilo, if you can get cleanly extracted chitin that is like lab grade. So there's some opportunity there for sure. There's more research that needs to be done in terms of extraction methods and the efficiency and all of that kind of stuff. But chitin is really, really interesting. The other thing, like I said, we can't digest it necessarily, so it ends up being like a prebiotic fiber for us. There's some initial studies in dogs that the presence of chitin actually helps aid weight loss. There's a lot of things with chitin that could get very interesting in the future, but it's just one of those things that we just don't know enough about yet. And that is my very unscientific description of chitin. Like I said, second most abundant biopolymer in the world behind cellulose. It's in freaking everything. And by freaking everything, I mean arthropods and fungi, which is everywhere. So, number 3 on my list of questions. Hi, many thanks for all of your videos. You're welcome. Can you please mention what can go wrong by using the breeding substrate? Yes. So already talked about different options on your breeding substrate, but most of the time I recommend people do not reuse your breeding substrate. Typically, it is so inexpensive that the risks associated with reusing it are just not worth the trade-off. So things that can go wrong, you can wind up with some sort of a mite infestation. You can wind up with something wrong with the substrate that you can't see in terms of like a buildup of hormones or chemicals or something that the crickets, there's too many things that can go wrong. But usually the things I'm worried about are some sort of infestation or I think that's really the only major thing that I know of. I have theories about like a buildup of, I don't want to call them gases necessarily, as more like chemicals. One way you can, and what I do in the winter is I set my used breeding substrate outside and let it freeze multiple times, and then I will reuse it. That should take care of any sort of other insect infestation that you might have. Obviously, you can't do that in the summer, but in the winter I do that, and we tend to not have any issues. Worst case scenario, like if you have to reuse it once, not a gigantic deal. But if you can get some sort of sterilization in there via freezing or heat, probably not a bad thing either. And then, and the other, the worst thing that can possibly happen is you reuse them, you get all of these eggs, and none of the eggs hatch. That would not be great. So any of, like I said, an infestation that can make it worse. This theoretical buildup of chemicals that I think probably happens can make it worse. Just if you have a economic ability to not reuse the substrate, just don't. The risks are not worth it. Okay, last question I have for today, unless anybody has any in the chat. And this came on a specific video. Ooh, sorry, I feel like I'm gonna sneeze. This came on a specific video with my water setup. Aren't these crickets moving some water with their feet, making their food and home moist? Or is this not a problem with such a solution? Short answer, no, not a problem. Longer answer, and maybe I need to do a better video that demonstrates like our watering system and all that kind of stuff, is our waterer has what I call a safety tray underneath it, because if what it's sitting on is not completely level and you get the water off because it's gravity fed, if it allows it to just keep feeding water, automatic fed, I'm going to end up with water everywhere. So theoretically, that tray is supposed to catch the water so that if we have a situation where the water dumps out, it doesn't ruin the entire bin. Doesn't always work, but we always have it worth a try. So the current method that we use with the chicken waterer, with the plastic base and then pea gravel around the bottom, there's access to water, but there's also plenty of access for things to crawl, or for crickets to crawl on it so that they don't drown. Their feet are not getting super duper wet. The feed is a ways away from the water, and then like I said, we have this dry tray underneath. So even in the tray, we don't see much of an indication of wet feet, if you will. So that's really just not a problem on our current setup. I could see other ways, other watering methods that I think that might become an issue, but for ours, we just don't have that problem. Our biggest hurdle with the waters, or our biggest risk with the waters in terms of getting moisture everywhere, is not having a completely level surface where the water continues to like dump out, and then just ruins the entire bin and you have to redo it, and it is painful when it happens. Luckily, it doesn't happen very often, but it is absolutely painful when it does. So, too long didn't read. No, we don't have a wet feet moisture problem with their food and their houses. So I will double check real quick on the Facebook to see if I ended up with any additional questions that I did not see. I don't think that I do, but so I think that will probably do it. Sorry, one more I need to check. I don't think, yep, don't have any other ones, and I did not post to Instagram today, so missed out on some potential questions there. So I will be back next week, probably next Sunday, which will be the, what are we, the 16th today? So it'll be the 22nd, 23rd. Math is hard. Anyways, I will be back next week for another live Q&A. So if you have any questions, if you're watching this later and you want to drop it in the chat, I will cover it the following week. And I think we'll just keep these weekly until I can no longer. New video coming out at noon on Tuesday. This one will be all about our feed and where we get it and why we use it. And if you don't have access to it, what you can use as an alternative and what you want to look for in a good feed source, because I've been getting a lot of questions about that lately. So for now, that'll be it. I need to go eat some breakfast. I need to go shovel some snow in Collins, unfortunately. So I'll be back next week. And like I said, new video coming up on Tuesday at noon. So check it out. Thanks, guys.